Welcome to this week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast, where experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based in Kingston upon Thames are invited on to share their story with us. I'm your host, Amir Rocha Lima.
This week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast is brought to you by Holland Harnham Wills, a financial planning and wealth management firm based in Kingston upon Thames. Holland Harnham Wills specialises in retirement planning for senior professionals and successful business owners. Visit hhw-uk.com to start feeling more relaxed and confident about your financial future.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast. I'm joined today by John Betteridge. John is the founder of JVB Solutions, a team of expert electricians, plumbers, gas and heating engineers, and builders that specialise in helping you to improve your property. What's unique about John is how he's built his company's culture to deliver a trusted service to his customers, leveraging the management skills he learnt during his time at a multinational construction company. And be sure to listen to the end, where John shares with us some tips for you to get the most out of your home improvement budget. So whether you're interested in knowing more about the home improvement sector or would like to know more about what it takes to run a successful independent business, then I hope you enjoy this episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast. Welcome, John Betteridge, to the Inside Kingston Podcast. John, I'm really excited about this conversation because the majority of our listeners would have either DIY'd their way through some home improvements with both positive and negative results, of course. So it's really great to get a chance to hear from somebody with the experience that you have in many facets of the home improvement and building world in general. And I think our listeners can learn a lot from not only your expertise in this area, but your expertise in running a business in this area, especially given these most unusual of times with coronavirus that we're living through at the moment. But to kick off this conversation, I'd like to go back in time, if that's okay. So, John, where did you grow up?
So I was born in Munster in Germany because my dad was in the armed forces, and then we moved to Birmingham, and I grew up and spent most of my life in Birmingham. My grandparents actually lived in London, so I did a lot of going back and forth, never quite having the right accent to fit into every area, so sort of a bit in between both. But yeah, the majority of my childhood and teens were in Birmingham, South Birmingham.
Oh, that's great. And did you originally train in a trade yourself, or did you go straight into running a business?
No, so I left school and under my dad's advice, took an apprenticeship in electrical engineering with NG Bailey and spent 5 years with them learning how to be an electrician. I then left and did some various different things while I found my feet with the type of the industry that I wanted to stay in, and ended up finding that being a qualifying supervisor and management was more to my tastes. And went into management at quite a young age, in my early 20s. And that's how it all began for me.
And I definitely want to pick your brains on your management style and expertise, John, throughout this conversation. But before we do so, what was it that prompted you to start your own business?
It was by accident, if I'm completely honest. So I was working as a construction manager for Skanska on the Royal London Hospital in Whitechapel. Mm-hmm. And I was there for about 3.5 years. And this is going back to 2010, when the if we call it the recession started to hit and large developments started to get cancelled in and around London. Mm-hmm. And around that time, I was being asked that the project I was on was coming to an end, and they were suggesting moving into Europe, and Sweden was mentioned as being the place that I was going to end up as a construction manager. And having a young family at the time, I really wasn't keen on moving to Sweden. So as the project sort of came to an end, voluntary redundancy was mentioned, and I decided to take voluntary redundancy. And I happened to be I woke up, that was on a Wednesday afternoon, and after taking voluntary redundancy, I was asked to leave. Not for any reason that if you don't work for the company, they don't have their policies that you just don't stay in the building. So I gathered my things and I left, explained to my wife at the time what I'd done, and because there was no planning, it was just a spur of the moment decision that I'd made. And then woke up on the Thursday morning, first time in my adult life ever having been unemployed or not having a job or a plan. And I went down to Old Cranians Rugby Club because I play rugby down there, and happened to be talking to some friends. And one of them mentioned that, well, before you were a manager, you used to be an electrician. So why don't you just do that for a bit while you wait to decide what you're going to do next? And a friend recommended another friend, and next thing you know, I was doing a rewire here and some light repairs here and general electrical work, which I'll be honest was very difficult because I hadn't worked with my hands for quite a while. And then I got a call from Croydon College, where I'd just completed my HNC in building services, electrical engineering. And they asked if I'd be willing to come back and do some teaching for them because one of their lecturers had actually left. I decided that was a good idea, explained that obviously I'd never done any teaching before. So they gave me some training and put me on a few courses. And
oh, wow.
You know, I was delivering engineering lectures to groups of other business owners and budding engineers. While I was doing that teaching for a year, the electrical work that I was doing, because it was only part-time, it started to grow. And next thing you know, we had a couple of employees and we had a few vans and we'd taken out insurance. And sort of before I knew it, by the end of that year, I had JVB Electrical Limited and everybody was enjoying it and we were getting a lot of good responses. Customers really, really liked us. And yeah, towards the end of sort of 2011, it happened. We had JVB Electrical. I decided to stop the teaching, even though it had already been a year, and it was a lot of fun, and put all of my efforts into what was then my business.
Oh, that's brilliant, John. So let's bring this conversation to the present. Tell us a little bit about your business today.
So I've been very lucky as a business owner in that I went, after the business had started, I happened to bump into a very close friend of mine who I hadn't seen for many years, because when I left Birmingham and moved to London, he went off to join the army, and we happened to bump into each other while I was teaching at Croydon College. He'd come back from the army, joined the fire brigade, and had then decided to work as an electrician on the side. Got talking with him, and within the first year of my business, Andy came and joined us. So it meant that not only was it just me, I almost had literally my best friend working alongside me, which made us very secure in what we could achieve. So we were very lucky. We then, just continued to grow. We are a very honest company, so we find that we get a very good response. All of our customers recommend us. So really, we've never had to go looking for work. All of our work has been quite reactive and it just comes to us. We don't really advertise apart from review sites, because we like to sort of sing and shout about all the great things we do, and we want people to be able to see the great things we do. But apart from that, we're not really massive as marketing goes. Obviously, that's changing now with COVID-19 and the current climate. We're now looking at what we might need to do going forward as the business grows. But historically, over the last 10 years, that's something we haven't needed to do. And we've been very lucky that our customers have been very supportive and helpful for us. And I suppose, with the support of Andy and then Paul, who joined us as well very early, the three of us managed to build a very successful and quickly growing business that allowed us to move into plumbing and heating after about 5 years. Because again, customer demand, they were very trusting of us as electricians, and they always wanted more. So you'd always get the question of, well, can you do plumbing? Can you do heating? Do you have a building company? Can you recommend this person? Because that trust was already built, other customers want you to continue that trust and obviously supply them with other people they can trust. And we just decided as a business, if we're going to keep recommending other companies, why don't we look at trying to support our customer base by offering additional services? Mm-hmm. And that's where the plumbing and heating came from 5 years ago. And then 3 years ago, the building side. And then we changed our name from JVB Electrical Limited and incorporated the Solutions brand, which is JVB Solutions Limited, which allows us to incorporate all work under one banner. So effectively one phone number for all property and commercial repairs and alterations. And it's just allowed us to continue to grow very smoothly. It's been good.
It's really fascinating the way you position that there, John, because you're absolutely right. Your profession is all about trust, because of course, when it comes to the actual sort of foundational level, when we're talking about retail clients, they're putting their sort of dreams, aren't they, in your hands? They're putting that house extension or that house, that home refurbishment or redevelopment in your hands and trusting your team to make that become a reality for them. And they might have spent years saving for this project to happen. So I really like the way you've built a business from the beginning, already thinking of offering trust first and letting the work come following that. That's amazing.
I mean, it's really so many cowboy builders and cowboy electricians and plumbers out there that their only real reason for being there is money, which, don't get me wrong, we're a business. Our intention is to make money, but it's never to the detriment of what we're trying to produce. One thing that we do have got a very good reputation for is never leaving. Like, things don't go to plan. It's construction, it's service and maintenance. Before we lift the floorboard or open up the cover, we don't really know what's under there. I mean, I've had one job which was very amusing, well, for us. is we quoted again a general rewire quite early on in our business. We turned up, the couple were lovely, they'd left and left us for the day, and we lifted the floorboards to find that the entire floorboard was full of concrete up to the bottom of the floorboard.
Oh gosh.
So that was obviously a call that we had to make to them. So look, we just cannot do the job the way we planned. Are you free? Could you pop back and we can talk about the ways around it? There are electricians and other tradesmen out there that may have decided this is too much hassle. This isn't the easy, quick in, quick out job we thought it was. Let's just leave. We pride ourselves on the fact of we will never, ever let a customer down. We will never say no. If a customer has used us before and they're on our existing customer list, we will always help them. It doesn't make any difference to us if it's complicated, if it takes a lot of time to plan, because as you said, it is the customer's dreams. These customers become very invested in the people they use, and they trust you with their house keys, literally with everything. We're going into people's houses and being completely left in their own private spaces. And we do quite a lot around the training of our staff and what we class as our JVB promise to our customers, which is it is their home. It's our place of work for a very small period of time in the grand schemes of a property, whether it be commercial or residential. And it's all about the engineers not treating it as a home for that period of time. They're not allowed to use the toilets, or they're not allowed to sit at the dining table and have their lunch. I mean, there are other places they can go. It is very much about do your work, be polite, be friendly, and be nice human beings, respect other people's spaces, do the best you can do, keep the customer informed, and then leave it the way you found it or better. Mm-hmm. And we spend a lot of time on our training and our recruitment process to make sure that every single one of our employees, whether it be an electrician, a plumber, heating engineer, a builder, a carpenter, a tiler, and the list goes on, they have to be the right people. And anybody that looks at a lot of our review sites will see that a lot of our customers will actually name the engineer that has been there or the operative, because they end up being almost very, very friendly with them and come out with this great relationship. And a lot of our guys will be asked by name to return because the customer feels they trust that person so much, which is a brilliant place to be.
That's a brilliant place to be, for sure. So, John, I appreciate that you guys do big commercial jobs as well. But for the I guess just to try to make this conversation as meaningful as possible to the majority of our listeners as well, I wouldn't mind focusing on the residential side of things. So let me ask you this. What can a client do so that they can get the most out of their budget when they work with you and your team? What are some of the things that people should think about to help you guys deliver the job that you would like to deliver?
So it's a tough one because there's lots of answers. But I suppose initially, the more they know about what they're trying to achieve, the easier it becomes. So the quicker we can see what they want, the quicker we can give them an idea of how we're going to create it. Now, again, talking residentially, that could be an extension or a loft conversion, or it could just be fitting a light fitting. Something as simple as how long the pendant cable needs to be can sometimes be a conversation that lasts half an hour between a husband and a wife in front of the engineer. So again, these are things that we smile and take away, and everybody, I suppose, enjoys the end result. But the more they know about what they're trying to achieve, the easier it is for everybody. That said, it's very difficult sometimes because that's not what they do day in, day out, for them to understand how to design or even where to start. We get a lot of questions around smaller renovations, or maybe even just something as simple as a rewire. And customers will always say, well, how do I know where to put my sockets? How do I know what furniture I'm going to buy? And again, it's very difficult for us to advise, apart from to say that if we cover these bases, this is generally our house will flow, our house will work. And we try and support everybody as much as we can with that. But another thing that might be worth mentioning is that customers sometimes, not so much when they've used us before, but certainly within the industry, customers think it's a bad thing to talk about money. That they think maybe that the best avenue is just to sort of hold all the cards around money, and that almost it becomes a bidding war between separate companies. That's difficult to advise against when there's no trust, but sometimes the easiest thing to do is to say to an engineer, whether it be us or another company, this is how much money I have to spend. What can I get from it? And I know that sort of puts customers on a bit of a back foot. So not everybody will do it, but certainly the ones that do, we form the best relationships with, because we then know what we've got to work with. So we know that we can recommend a level of service from a time point of view and a finish point of view, and plastering, decorating, or this type of light fitting, or this type of socket, or this type of tap, because we don't know sometimes if a customer wants a £50 tap or a £500 tap. And having a budget in mind is sometimes it just makes the conversations quicker and allows us to offer more advice. But I do understand equally, I fully understand why customers don't want to supply money or budget costs straight away, because there are lots of not so trustworthy guys out there.
Yeah.
But that would help. That would certainly, knowing what you want and how much you want to spend is always a very good place to start.
No, those are great tips, John. I appreciate you sharing that. So look, I want to switch gears on you slightly if I can, and pick your brains and skills as a manager. So let me start by asking you this. How do you think about recruitment, John? So for our listeners who perhaps are looking to enter a trade or maybe retrain into a trade, I'm just curious as to how somebody who runs a business like yours even thinks about finding the right people to continue building your team and growing your company.
So that's another good question, because it allows me to mention another member of our team. So as I mentioned with Andy and Paul, from an engineering background, I've been very lucky from a team point of view, having that trust in my engineers out in the field. Because as we've grown, obviously I've become more office-based and less field-based. But I've also been very lucky to have also Cato, who's our office manager and recruitment manager as well. Because of his background, he knows a lot about recruitment, interview techniques, and getting the most out of somebody when they're sitting in for that interview. We aren't as interested as some companies might be about qualifications and about training, because we can train anybody to be an electrician, we can train anybody to be a plumber or a heating engineer or a tiler, and we're happy to spend the money, the time and the investment on those people. From day one, 10 years ago, we've always had apprentices. There's never been a period within our business trading history that we haven't had at least one apprentice. I think we even had 5 or 6 at one time altogether. So it's one thing that we've always been very passionate about, being an apprentice myself many years ago. But also, we've found that you cannot train good manners and just niceties. You can't train somebody to be a nice person. They have to already be that person. So a lot of our interview techniques and conversations about people's past is all about them as a person. What do they like to do with their spare time? How do they socialise? What do they do from a sports perspective? It tells you a lot about the person's mindset and equally who they've worked for, getting references, doing DBS checks, because obviously we're very thorough on making sure the person we're employing is the person. And then when we do employ them, if they do get past sort of stage 1 and 2, we then keep a very close eye on them, make sure they know what our JVB promise is and what we like to deliver to our customer, and show them the way that we want everything done, how clean and tidy everything is. The equipment we have on all of our vans for cleaning, tidying, having our ID badges, wearing our uniform, keeping the van clean and tidy itself. Just those little sort of ingrained things that we do just to be a better company than our competitors. And then once we've got that right, then we spend the time and investment making sure they're the best engineer they can be. And
sorry, carry on, John. I interrupted you there.
No, that's fine. I was going to say we've just found that is the best place to start. We can get the best engineer, but if he isn't a nice person, it's never going to work.
Yeah, so we're kindred spirits.
It's got to be person first, then training.
Absolutely. So at our firm, it's funny because we're completely different fields, of course, but at our firm, we subscribe to this view similar to you that character is fate. As long as we find the people with the right character, we know we can train them with the technical skills they require to be able to fulfill that position. And that just sets us as a team and them as an employee in the right pathway to become a success. So that's really interesting that applies to pretty much every single field I've interviewed in this series so far. Let me ask you this, John. Obviously, you manage many different projects of many different sizes at different times. What are some of the tips you could give our listeners about managing projects and coordinating different teams on different jobs to make sure that the outcome is successful, both for you as a business and also for the different customers you're servicing?
So the first rule really of management is planning. If you do not plan, you can't sort of complain that things didn't go the way you expected because there was no plan to follow. So one of the big things we try to do is slow things down at the start. Obviously, customers, once they've made a decision, they're very keen to get started. As with builders, architects, developers, and the other people we work with, sometimes once that decision's been made, we are going to go with JVB. Things need to happen very quickly. And we like to try and slow things down just at the start, just to make sure we get a plan. We know where the materials are coming from and when they're going to arrive. Customer point of view, which engineer they're going to have. Do we need to take the engineer over, do a handover, introduce them to the customer? How intricate is the design that's been done by either myself or the management team? And then it's making sure we follow that plan. So it's revisited obviously on a daily basis by the install team, and it's revisited either weekly or every few days by the manager, and it's obviously managed very closely by the office team. So we know at every point what we should be achieving, and if we're achieving it, and if we're not, we can work out why not, and we can keep the customer informed at all times. Because apart from that plan, it's all about communication. We have to communicate at every level, from the apprentice up to the director, really, from the office staff ordering the materials and programming the team, to the manager signing off the material purchases and the labour prices, and then keeping the customer informed, so the customer's kept happy and they know exactly where we are each step of the process, whether it be a small job or a big job. So yeah, planning and communication, I would say, the two most important things in any project.
That's brilliant, John. Look, I'm going to pause here and just ask you Well, so first say, so far, absolutely brilliant. You're obviously a pro at telling your story, and you know your business inside out. So this has been really easy from my perspective so far. How's it felt so far for you?
Yeah, not bad. I'm trying to make sure I stick to the brief and the questions you're asking.
No, honestly, it's brilliant. And the context you give around the projects as well is great, because listeners love listening to the little sort of side stories or the little bits that might go into your mindset that they haven't thought about, because obviously they're just a customer. They're not a professional like you.
Thank you. I'm also trying not to drink as I'm getting them vertical. I see my drink and I keep realising it's making a noise every time I pick it up.
Yeah. So look, do you want me at this stage to tee you up for anything that we haven't talked about yet?
As a business, we are trying really hard at the moment to change what we've done the last 10 years. Because even though it's worked, we've realised that the business is growing, and it's growing quicker than we planned, because there was no, equally, like I've just said, because there was no plan at the start, we've allowed the business to almost control what happened. Over the last 12 to 18 months, we've changed that. So I no longer work in any operational part of the business. So over the last 12 to 18 months, we've actually been looking at marketing and proper recruitment, strategy, structures, everything that comes up to making a successful business. Oh, excuse me. So one thing that it might be nice to mention is that we have created this JVB promise, which is as simple as it sounds. It's a leaflet that goes out to all of our customers before they decide to engage with us, to hopefully convince them that we are the right trustworthy company. We're also spending a lot of time on social media and newsletters and things like that, just trying to make sure that customers are aware that we're still there and what we're doing.
So let me ask you about those things then, if you don't mind, because I think I really like what you're saying already. So apologies for butting in, but I'll say something like this. John, in preparation for this interview, I've obviously been following you guys on social media, and I really like the way you position your firm on social media. And also, you've already throughout the show talked about the JVB promise a number of times. So would you mind telling our listeners a little bit about how you think of using social media to perhaps attract more people to your company, and also what the JVB promise is?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the social media thing has been quite new for us. We employed a gentleman called Michael, who's been absolutely brilliant in allowing our business to grow over the last 12 to 18 months. And almost, as I said earlier in the interview, is that we never really advertised at all. We've always just allowed our customers to almost dictate our growth and what they needed from us. And over the last 12 to 18 months, we put a lot of time and effort into social media, that's being picked up on. Another reason for that, I think, is because over the last sort of 6 to 8 months, we've been working very hard on delivering our JVB promise, as you mentioned. And that's been quite core to how we're trying to try and set up the business and train our staff and everybody that answers phones, so that what we're trying to deliver is very clear across the business. The first point being, obviously, that full solution that I mentioned. We're trying to give every customer that one-stop shop, that area where no works as a single specialist company rather than a whole group. And it's so painful to watch. And you look at the customer and you can just see the stress and almost the tears coming up, because they just don't know what to do, because they've got two conflicting reports from two specialists and a massive void, whether it be a cash void or a time void or just a specialism void. And there's nothing they can do about it, because it just wasn't thought of by their architect or their manager. So the reason the solution brand come across and the promise we made is that we don't allow those gaps to exist. Because we control the whole process, there is literally just one phone call, and that's either my manager's or it's mine. And my number is still on all of our publications. If anybody has a question to ask, or there is an issue, which is very few and far between, they can talk to any of us and it's resolved. And there is no hiding behind, well, that's his job or that's his job. The job is just ours, and we make sure the solution fits the customer's brief. The second part of it is obviously transparent estimates. So that solution can work, we are very clear, honest, and we tailor every price to the customer's needs. And we make sure that they're very aware of what choices they're making and how that choice dictates the price. And again, sometimes customers don't want as much information, sometimes they do, and it's just trying to find the level of information that each customer requires. And then, as I mentioned earlier, all of our guys making sure they are full-rounded specialists and experts in every single one of their chosen fields. And we spend a lot of time and money every single year making sure that's the case. Regulations and British standards change constantly, materials change, ideas change, regulations change. So we spend a lot of time making sure that is suitable for each of the operatives that we've got. Into our guarantee, and as I said, we never ever walk away from a customer, ever. We never ever have. We make sure that everything we do takes the job from the start all the way to the end as as easily and as pain-free as we possibly can make it, and try and make sure the cost is as near to the quote as we possibly can. And when I say that possibly can, obviously every part of that is communicated with the customer, because the customer will be the one that's dictating those changes and those price sometimes decreases, but sometimes increases. And we just make sure we work with them, and we guarantee all of our work afterwards in line with the manufacturer's guarantees for work we've installed. But equally, we don't time watch. If you've ever installed anything for you and it stops working, just give us a call. We'll come, we'll work out why, and then we can have a conversation about how best we can proceed afterwards. But I said we'd never leave a customer ever without any sort of response. And then the customer satisfaction guarantee as well is that we will make sure we work with the customer to get it right from the start to the finish. And if they're not happy, we'll just keep going. And we've found that those 5 promises really give certainly new customers, but even the existing customers, the faith to continue to use us, knowing that we promise to do those things every single time, and we'll be held to them every single time without them even being mentioned, because it's the complete ethos and environment that our company works to. And it's just been really nice to get that in writing and make sure that every single part of the business knows that that's what we're promising to do. So it's been good.
That's good. John, what are some of the key business lessons you've learned throughout your life?
That's a good question. So with every business, there's obviously going to be certain things that you need to overcome. I've never been a business owner before. I mean, I know I've been a business owner for 10 years, but being an engineer by background means that I do spend a lot of time planning and assessing and sort of testing and measuring things just by nature. But I definitely find that having a business has tried some of those things. It is very easy sometimes to get caught up in growth and in speed and equally sometimes revenue, and looking at turnover rather than maybe margin and almost business longevity and customer happiness. So there's lots of different trials and things that are sort of chucked in as a business owner to sort of take your attention away. I think one of the biggest trials that comes on the back of that is just remembering what you stand for. And that is why we went down this route over the last 18 months of making sure the business knew what direction we were taking it in, to know what our promise was or is, what we were trying to deliver, and how much it meant to us to make sure that we got the customer satisfaction correct. We do that again by backing it up with reviews and stuff. So I suppose, the trial is making sure that we do not get sidetracked with our sort of mission, and that we make sure we train all of our teams and even across the board from office admin to accounts admin all up to managers, that everybody's working in the right direction. It's a very difficult thing to get right as a business owner, because it takes a lot of time and doesn't necessarily yield anything immediately. So you've really got to just keep drumming it into people, what's important for you as a business and the direction you're going in. So I think that's probably been one of the hardest things over the last few years. Obviously, this period of time is very difficult for any business owner. So I've learned an awful lot. Equally, some of it about my team. I've got the most amazing team of engineers and staff. Some of them being so selfless in that offering to work for free to try and keep costs down, offering to help customers in their own time. And we're doing a lot around that, actually, because I've got such a good team, and they've allowed our business to continue. Obviously, within guidelines, we've been able to offer the NHS, any NHS staff that use us, basically free work, or at the very minimum, we're doing it at cost with no profit, no overhead, just the engineers' time covered, so the engineers get paid. We've been able to offer local businesses discounts, and not only have we offered all of our local partners, so there's lots of sports clubs, theatres like the Rose Theatre, Old Colney Rugby Clubs, just to name a few, that have done some partnership work with us that's allowed us to offer their members a 10% discount, and then we feed 10% back in to either the clubs or the theatres to allow them to obviously continue with some revenue while they're closed and can't work, to try and keep those guys alive, or to put that money to a charity of their choice. And I suppose by trying to build those different avenues to work with our partners and try and work with the people that have supported us over the years, that's been quite a pivotal point within sort of a business management sort of structure that's allowed us to overcome some of the immediate problems of COVID-19. But it's been the team. Having the right team is what's allowed us to get through this. So that's two quite main things, I suppose.
No, that's really good, John. When you look back at your career journey today, what are you most proud of?
I was very proud of, I started management quite young. I did that because I've always been very determined. So it's not necessarily, I suppose, a career point, but certainly when I worked for Skanska as a construction manager, I was learning how to work in a very sort of office orientated environment. Even though I had been in management before that, I'd been what's classed as a journeyman qualified supervisor. So I would travel up and down the country and into Europe, managing teams, doing data recovery breakdowns, so taking generators and UPSs and making sure that businesses that had fires or large outages were able to continue to work. And I moved from there to being in working for Skanska at the Royal London Hospital to be in a very static office. I've never worked in an office before. So I found that quite a challenging time. And on top of that, I had a very young family, and I decided to try and do my MVQ level 4 in construction management, my MVQ level 5 in project management, and my HNC in building services electrical engineering, all at the same time. So each of those is a 2-year course. So on top of trying to learn a new type of industry and work in a very competitive role as a construction manager, lots of jostling for who's right and what works and what doesn't. I also did 6 years of training in 2 years, whilst also trying to bring up 2 children under the age of 4. So it was challenging times, and living in London from Birmingham. So I didn't really know anybody around here. So I started playing for Oakham Lions Rugby Club. So lots of change happened in 2 years, and I think I'm proudest that not only did I get through it, I came out of it a much better person, and which led me to where I am today. So I think that was the changing or turning point within my career that I saw.
That's brilliant, John. What next for you and your business? Are there any projects in the pipeline that you can tell us about?
So because of COVID-19, obviously a lot of things have slowed down an awful lot, and there is a lot of uncertainty as to what's to come. As a business, one of the pivots we were doing already before this happened is that we were trying to offer a more rounded service and maintenance coverage to the customers we already had, and equally then trying to push a bit more into that sector. So we've been doing a lot of work in the background of producing that documentation, our sort of contracts, our service level agreements, even getting down to training about how we're going to actually deliver this from an engineer point of view. And that was meant to be going live around now. With everything that's happened, we're probably going to put that to the back burner and concentrate more on our core deliverables over the next few months, and look at probably delivering that probably next year now. And when I say deliver, it's something that we are already working on and working in. We're going to go to market slightly greater in greater numbers and try and get more customers in that area. Apart from that, our building services side of the business is still working. So we have had a few customers that have put back property renovations or extensions, but we still have lots of tenders coming through. There's still quite a lot of growth in the residential market. We need to see what happens with the property market and see from a buying and selling point of view. But no, we're still very much on that side of things, business as usual. We have a couple of good tenders out there that I'm not sure I'm allowed to talk to about all of them, but certainly there's some good renewable stuff from car charging for some very large companies. Lots of opportunities on that side that we're seeing next year as well. So we've got some excitement coming through.
Exciting times ahead, John. That's great to hear.
Hopefully. Yes, hopefully.
As we start to wrap up, I'd like to ask you a few quick fire questions that our listeners are always interested in. So, John, what do you do to relax outside of the office?
So usually it's playing rugby, or just spending time with my wife and family and my children and dog, so dog walking. I also like to run and go to the gym, so I keep quite active. I'll be honest, I do play props. I'm not the smallest or swiftest of runners, but I do like to keep active. So lots of outside games. And
are there any books that you've recently read that you'd recommend to our listeners?
I mean, I read a lot of management books and business books. Obviously, anybody that hasn't read E-Myth, I forget the author's name, is something that really needs to be looked at. At the time, obviously, that we're in, I'm now reading Consistent Cash Flow, which is obviously another sort of COVID-related book, just making sure that I'm keeping on top of how I manage the business's cash flow to keep us afloat at this time. We seem to be going through a bit of a phase from a management point of view with me and my management team, where we keep passing around books that seem to be based around different animals. So we've got the 1 Minute Manager that talks a lot about monkeys and passing monkeys around, and we've got a time management book called Eat the Frog, which talks about eating your frog first thing in the morning. And we've just implemented a new meeting, a way of carrying out our manager meetings that is called the lion technique. So we're almost having a bit of a laugh and a joke as to what's the next book we're going to read that brings an animal into the business and how we integrate with each other. So we're always keeping abreast of as much of this type of stuff as we can as we grow as managers and as a business.
And just as a side note, I definitely second the E-Myth by Michael Gerber. It's an absolutely great book.
It is a great book. It's very interesting. Some of it I think is getting a little bit dated, but still very worth the read by anybody that's interested in business as a starter. Yeah, very good.
And are there any movies or TV shows that you've recently watched that you would recommend to our listeners?
So I do love my films and TV. I do watch maybe a bit too much TV when I should be working. So what have I watched recently? I was bought a poster by my wife at Christmas that has sort of 100 movies you should make sure you watch. So I've been enjoying going back with my children, who are now 14 and 12, and trying to sort of relive some of the great films that I've watched growing up, and watching them just completely moan that it's dated and that's not how CGI should look and that's rubbish. I mean, I watched Ghostbusters with them the other day, and they enjoyed it, I believe, but they moaned about the CGI constantly, which was quite amusing. When you do look back at it, you think just how dated it is, but it's still a great film. And TV series, I have just finished the 3rd season of Ozark, which I very much enjoyed.
It's an absolutely great series and very topical to my profession, so I'm glad you mentioned it.
It is.
Finally, where can people go to find out more about you and your business?
So we are everywhere on the internet. You can't really go onto any trade review site, trade inquiry site without finding us. We try and make sure we're very easy to find. Obviously, Checkatrade being one of the most prominent review sites. If you type in JVB Solutions, you'll find us there. Or you can go to our website, obviously www.jvb-solutions.com. But really, you can find us everywhere. We've got advertising at a lot of the local sports clubs. So Surbiton Hockey Club, we're in their magazine. We're on the Rosalind Park website, the obviously Old Cranleans. A lot of our partners and friends and family are all big members down there. Yeah, you can't go very far without finding us if you live anywhere near Kingston or Thames Ditton or the surrounding areas.
And for the benefit of our listeners, I'll make sure that I add the links to those resources on the show notes. John, thank you for joining us here on the Inside Kingston podcast. It's been a pleasure getting to know your story.
No, thank you so much for asking me to. It's been very enjoyable. Thank you.
That wraps up another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Make sure to check out our guests' website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they're doing. If you have any questions or know someone who should be a guest on the show, please feel free to get in touch. I would also love it if you could go to iTunes and leave us a review and a 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on some great guests, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rate well on iTunes so that others can find and enjoy the show too. Thanks for listening.